Hey there, friends. Did you also see my thing like all wonking out? I don't know what's going on with my computer, but it apparently doesn't want to run fast right now. Yeah, so yesterday I did this debug jest test thing, and I actually did that intentionally because I wanted to do that again today to debug React's event system, understand it a little bit better to solve a problem here. So recently, DOM testing library added a new feature for the Fire event API. This is actually coming from React testing library, but it actually just re-exports the Fire event from DOM testing library. And so when you call an event, then you pass it a node, and then you can pass an object. And this object is properties you want to be set onto the event. And target was one of those properties you set on the event, but the target actually references the node that you're calling the event on. And so what we added was the ability to add a target here, and any of the values that you provide to target will first get added to the node before the event is fired. And the reason that we did that is, here, let me show you what it's doing actually. The reason we did that was so you could avoid a issue with how React's event system works. So if we go events, where's it? Yeah. And we'll go down here. What's happening is we get the event initialization from the default initialization for that event. That's what bubbles and cancelable and stuff. And the initialization you provide, and then we pluck off the target to get the target properties, but off of that we pluck the value. So for target properties, we simply assign those properties onto the node that you're firing the event on. But for value, that one's special. And so if you are providing a value, we're going to set native value, and we do this magic stuff that I kind of borrowed from an issue on the React docs. And I'm going to show you why this function is important and why doing this won't work. So here, let me comment this out, save this, and we'll run the tests. See, it will not work. Yikes. Maybe I should just run one test at a time. Okay, so what's happening here is the value property is getting set on user input, and that says set the value to upper. And then we want to fire a change so that we call this on upper change. So like what we want to have happen is when this on upper change is called, e.target.value is whatever we set that value to. And then we call set state to set upper to the uppercase of that. And then the value will get updated. So the problem is, here, let me run this in tests, run test. Watch, and actually that'll do only changes, which is this is the only file, so it'll only run this one. The problem is that this function is not getting called. So why is this function not getting called? Well, let's go debug some stuff and we'll look at what's happening. So we'll run node inspect break. And then node modules, test, and then we'll pass run in band and watch and on change. Okay, cool. So debugger is listening. We'll go here and pop that open, and we're off to the races. Cool. So we'll just play that through. And once that's finished, okay, cool. So now we've loaded all of our files. So here's our on change, and we could put a breakpoint in here and everything. And so what we could do is put a breakpoint in here. We step in, and just keep on stepping. But eventually you'll get into like JS DOM code and stuff for dispatching the event. And it's all happening synchronously, but it's kind of confusing. So I'm going to skip that part, and I'll just get you to where our event handler is. So this is what I did. Here, we're just going to get rid of some of this stuff. Actually, I can get rid of that too. So I open up React DOM development, Command P, React DOM development. And in here, oh, spoiler alert. So in here, it's one giant file that's compiled with, and that's generated with rollup. And thank heaven to rollup, because the code is actually mostly intact. There's not a whole lot of weird stuff going on here, and so it's fairly straightforward to follow along, even though it's like an enormous file and it's really complicated and stuff. But the reason, or the nice thing about this, because this is the development version, it's using all the right variable names, and so we can search around here. So what I first looked for was, for React to be able to respond to events, it's going to add event listener. Okay, so let's see, we've got add event listener, capture event. Okay, let's do the event bubble listener. So trap bubble event, the only places is being used, and it's going to call add event listener on that element, get raw event name, and then as the last argument here, dispatch. So this is going to be, it's saying element, add event listener, this event type, whatever that is. So presumably change might be one of those, or something else. Spoiler alert, I don't think they have a change event handler. I don't remember. Change, yeah, they do, but change, that's not the change event that you think it is. Change event in the browser actually only fires when you make a change to the input and then blur. There is an input, and that's mostly what the change event is, except the change event in React supports content editable, and input isn't supported on content editable, or yeah. So anyway, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Add event listener. So add event bubble listener. So we're adding some event listeners, and then we're calling dispatch.bind top level type. So this dispatch is what's going to be called when an event fires. That's where I want to put my breakpoint, is whatever this dispatch is. Also, we have dispatch interactive event or dispatch event, and we can look around, but it's actually dispatch event is what we want. So I'm going to look for dispatch event, and it's actually all over the place. Oh, there it is. Sweet. This is where that function is defined, and so here we're going to put our breakpoint. Okay. Cool. So let's go ahead and I'll hit enter to rerun my tests. It's going to break on that breakpoint. Sweet. So top level type change. Native event is change event also. Cool. So let's go ahead and play through here. We're doing some bookkeeping. Okay, yeah, that looks okay. And then batch updates. Okay, let's dive into that. Is batching. Looks like it is batching. Now we're going to batch updates. We'll dive into that. And React does a lot of interesting things. Let's dive into that now. See, lots of this stuff I'm like, yeah, I don't know what's going on, but I don't see anything that looks like what I want yet, so I'll just keep on going. We're finding a root container, pushing some ancestor state something or other. Okay, and for each of those ancestors, we're going to be calling some stuff. Okay, run extracted events in batch. Okay, that looks interesting. Let's dive into that. Now we're getting our target. Okay, that's getting our event target. That we didn't actually dive into that event. We thought we did. That was this function call is what we dove into. So let's now dive into run extracted events in batch, extract events, and then run in batch. Okay, let's dive into that. I'm not sure what that is. Okay, it looks like it's just going to be accumulating these events. Let's keep on going in here. Possible plugin. No possible plugin, whatever that is. Let me move this over closer. Oh, possible plugin. Okay, it looks like there is a possible plugin. The extract events. Interesting. Okay, so we'll get those extracted events. Nope, there's no extracted events for that possible plugin. Okay, 1 second. I think my wife's coming in. I'll be right back. It'll be very quick. Okay, yeah, she just had to bring in the dog. Okay, so I don't think this is where I want, so I'm going to jump out of that, and then I'll dive into run events in batch. Okay, we got an event queue going on here. See, this is all pretty complicated stuff. That doesn't look like that was quite what I was looking for. So I think I must have missed it. Perform sync work. Interesting. I don't even know what this is doing. Okay, well, I'm gonna skip some of this stuff. So I had to do a little bit of digging. I can't remember where exactly I found it. I think what I gave up on this, and then I just said, okay, let's find out what change, like what's happening with change. So I just search around for change. Okay, we've got this top change. I think I searched around for top change a little bit, but that didn't really do a whole lot of good for me because it's a different event in React or in the browser than it is in React. So just keep on looking for change. Change event plugin. Interesting. Okay, let's look at what the change event plugin is all about. Aha, interesting. So this is where I just stuck a breakpoint, see what happens here, and I'll play through. And it looks like I missed that part, so we'll hit enter here. And I'm going back here again. I'm going to get rid of this breakpoint. I don't want this anymore. We'll play through. Aha, okay, so we somehow got into the change event. That got into this extract event. So at some point, I guess this extract events thing did actually do something useful. But the extracted events that we get back from this call was falsy. And so that's why the event isn't being called, right? Okay, so we got to figure out why is this returning a falsy value. It looks like, yeah, it could potentially return a falsy value. The only place it's returning anything is right here. So we need the get target inst function to be something, and we need the inst that we get back from that to also be something, and then we need the event from that call to be something. So at some point, one of these things gets to be falsy. So let's go ahead and we'll continue to here just to see. Okay, so that function is something. Let's continue, or here we'll just step over and step over. And inst, oh, that's undefined. So let's put our breakpoint right there. And we'll play through there. We'll hit enter to run that again. And we'll dive into get target inst function. Okay, so the top level type is change. So we've got top change and top input. Okay, so the change event can be fired on a change or an input. We could fire an input. But in our code, we want to be able to fire a change event because this is called onChange. So users of this library want to be able to call change. We don't want to force them to call input. So we're good. We want to continue to call change, which is apparently works just fine. And so then we'll go into this if statement. We dive into there and get inst if value changed. Okay, so let's get the target node. That's probably going to work fine. Yep, target node is our input. Update value if changed. So we need to go dive into that and see, because that needs to be truthy, and I think right now it's returning a falsy value. So there is a node, so it's not going to be falsy. Now we're going to get this tracker thing. So let's go get tracker. This is coming from track value on node. So here, let's find where that get tracker is actually. That's fine. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. Get tracker. So get tracker just gets the value tracker off of the node. The value tracker is set right here when we call track, and I'm pretty sure track is being called when we initialize these elements. We're just calling track on each of these elements. So when React renders it in the first place, it's going to start tracking its value, and it'll track input, text area, option, and select. So that's kind of fun. So what is this track thing doing anyway? Track value on node. Well, here we'll skip over that. So this we'll get to that eventually. So we have this tracker thing, and that tracker can get us a value. So it's going to, here, let me turn that off. Spoiler alert. We'll get the value from that tracker. And the last value is stuff. Now hold on a second. The last value is stuff. No, that it shouldn't know that the last value is stuff. The last value is nothing, right? Because we rendered the input. This.state.upper was an empty string. So the last value should have been an empty string. And we just set the value to upper. So that should be what the next value is, or the current value. So get value from node, I dive into that. And they'll say if there's not a node, then just return empty string. If it's checkable, then we'll check checked, but this isn't an input, or this isn't a checkbox, this is an input. So it's going to get the node value. So that's working properly. But what's going on here is now the last value, so somehow the tracker thinks that the last value is stuff and the next value is stuff. So what's happening is it's saying, well, nothing changed, so I'm going to return false, which means I'm not going to call that event handler. So I'm returning a falsy value here and here and here, and that's why inst is undefined. It's a falsy value. So I'm not going to return my event, and I won't call my event handler. So that's a bummer. Let's play this through and let's find out why the tracker is doing what it's doing. So I'll hit enter again. We'll dive into this. We'll go dive into this and dive into update value of changed. Okay, now let's go into this. Well, we have the tracker on the node already. We need to know what this tracker is doing. So luckily for us, that code's just right here. Track value on node. Okay, so this is when the node is initially created by React, it calls this track value on node. It'll determine whether it's checkable. So if it's a checkbox, it'll get the descriptor, get the content value. Then it's going to do this special check for certain tests that spy on input values in Safari. I actually am kind of curious. Find value or Safari then bail. Yeah, see, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but it looks like if we could figure out a way to make this return early, then we might not actually have many problems. I don't know. I haven't experimented with that yet. So let's go ahead and I'll just add a breakpoint here to the top, and we'll play this through and run this again, because that function's called when it's initially rendered, when it renders the input. So it'll happen first. Cool. So we've got our node. It's HTML input element. So we'll step over. It's we're tracking the value, not the checked. And then we're getting a descriptor. Okay, so if you're not familiar with descriptor, it's almost kind of used for reflection in some ways. Yeah, it's just a way that describes a value on an object or a property on an object. We're going to get the current value, basically calling toString on node value field, and that current value is an empty string. Makes sense. I think it could only ever be something else if you're like rehydrating something and the input already has a value or something. Or maybe if you set the value property, yeah, probably if you set the value property to something, maybe it will render initially with that value. But in our case, we're not rendering it with anything. So here we're going to step over that. And we're going to get the getter and setter from the descriptor. Okay, and then we're actually going to override the node value field property definition. So this isn't something you normally do a whole lot, but in React they're doing it so they can keep track of the current value as JavaScript sets a .value, and that's where things are getting kind of tricky. So when we call get value, it's gonna, like down here, remember when we're getting the last value, we're going to call get value, and remember that was giving us the stuff that we didn't want. It should have been an empty string. So that current value is actually going to be called or updated every single time we call set value, but also, and we don't actually call that directly, that's going to be React that calls it, but it also is going to get called every time the set is executed on node.value. You know when that happens? Let me show you when that happens on change. So I'm gonna actually, I don't think I need that. So I'm going to just step over that, and it's gonna define property again, get my tracker and return that. I'm gonna play through, and I'm gonna stop here on the set. Now, how did this set happen? Let's step back. Oh snap! Did you know that you can actually, when you access or set a property like this, you might actually be calling a function? Yeah, it's the setter. So you're actually, here we're calling a function, and that is updating the current value. So React has the capability of keeping track of what the current value is whenever a dot value is set. This could be useful for like if you're imperatively setting the value in your application code or something, and they only want to call the onChange handler when the value is actually changed from where it was before. So they need to keep track of what the dot value property is, and so that's why they do this track value on node thing, so that they can keep track of the imperative setting of values. So that's great, except it messes us up when we're trying to test our stuff because we want the change event to fire, but it's not firing because React is keeping track of when you imperatively set the value. And so you set the value and React is like, okay, I'll keep track of that. And then you fire a change and it's like, well, it hasn't changed, so I'm just going to ignore it. So that is what is causing all of our trouble. So that's frustrating. And so if you go into this issue, this is where all of this was discussed and how to get around this problem. And somebody left a really helpful function, set native value, and I used it and improved it a little bit. So this is like all like not React specific at all, but just a like same idea for setting the value in a way that can't be tracked by React. So this function exists inside DOM testing library right here, and so if you want to set the value, what we'd have to do is instead of upper input.value, we'd say set native value on upper input and then pass it the value, and then we'd have to have that set native value elsewhere, and then we could call fire event change. And that's super annoying. Like, who wants to do that? Nobody wants to do that. I don't want to do that. Do you want to do that? No, nobody wants to do that. So what we did is when you pass a target property, when you're, right here, when you're firing an event, we're going to take that target property, take all the properties on it, and merge those here, except for the value we're going to call set native value, so that we can set it in a way that React can't keep track. And then we'll fire the event like we would normally. And that's that. That's pretty much what's going on. That's why I changed things. Now, you may be wondering, okay, but what about simulate.change? Well, simulate works a fair amount differently. Simulated. So it calls this execute dispatch function. See. I think it does it. I think it might be calling execute dispatches in order, actually. Here, let's see, simulate, or let's see, test utils, connect, test utils, like do not use or you will be fired thing. What is it? Dispatch. What are they doing? I can't remember. If you step into it, it'll take you to right to the code where it's happening. I can't remember exactly what it's doing, but basically, it's saying simulated is true, and so that kind of follows a different code path. And I'm not really a huge fan of that, the idea of following a different code path in general. because like, what if that code path is broken? Well, your test could break, or your test could succeed and your application's still broken. I don't feel super comfortable with that. So that's part of the reason why I want to do these native DOM events that we're firing. But it does come with the cost of having to do some extra stuff too. So anyway, also Dan Abramoff told me that I shouldn't use simulate, so I listened to him. So okay, cool. So that's that. This one's been a little bit longer than a short video, but I hopefully it was helpful. Yeah. So when you're using React Testing Library, use change. There is currently a bug, which I think in looking at this, I'm pretty sure this will be pretty straightforward. Let me try something really quick. I think this will be a pretty straightforward fix. Well, no, I'll do it later. But there is a bug right now with checkboxes that this isn't working, so I'm gonna fix that here in a bit. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful to you, and I will see you all later. Bye.